Assalamualaikum and hi. So in this video, we will be presenting about audience analysis. So one of the ways speakers analyze audience by looking at the demographic traits. Two steps are required to do this. Firstly, identify the general demographic features of your audience, and secondly, gauge the importance of those features to a particular speaking situation. So I'm going to move to the first trait of analyzing audience demographics, which is age. We know that each generation has more or less common values and experiences that set it apart from other generations. For example, if you talk about Lil Nas X or Cardi B in front of audience of elder people, they will have no idea about who you talk. Similarly, to young adult, they will not know who is Watergate if you mention him in your speech. So age is a major factor in audience analysis. So prepare a speech that is suitable for your audience age group. Moving on to the second trait, which is religion. Religious views are among the most emotionally charged and passionately defended of all human concerns. So you cannot assume that your views on religion are also shared with your listeners. And also, there is a great diversity within different faiths like Catholics and Protestant in Christianity. And also be sure to consider the religious orientations of your listeners every time you speak on a topic with religious dimensions to avoid embarrassing pitfalls.
Next, gender and sexual orientation. Public speakers have to be wary of pigeonholing listeners into stereotypical gender types. For example, use gender-neutral language or terms such as firefighter, chairperson, flight attendant, or the pronoun he may be replaced with he or she or they when the gender of the referred person is unknown. Secondly, speakers who fail to take account of current gender attitudes are almost certain to provoke negative reactions among some listeners, male and female alike. Third, keep an eye out for language, examples, and other elements that may unintentionally exclude listeners with same-sex partners. For example, asking a person is seeing someone or has a significant relationship rather than if one has a boyfriend or girlfriend, or use the term partners rather than husband or wife. Lastly, it's also important to recognize that some traditional categories for gender and sexual orientation are more fluid than they were once seen as being.
The fifth demographic audience analysis is racial, ethnic, and cultural background. First of all, the United States is a multiracial and multi-ethnic country. The majority of Americans support this diversity as a positive development in today's globalized world, especially among Americans born from 1981 to 2000, known as Millennial Generation. The speaker must be sensitive to issue of race, ethnicity, and cultural background because people of Latinos, Blacks, Asians, and many others have different customs and beliefs. So, be aware that some of the listeners may have racial, ethnic, or cultural perspective that will affect their attitudes toward the speech topic. Last but not least, group membership is also one of the demographic audience analysis. This is because Americans are very group-oriented as worker belongs to unions. Similar groups also abound on campus, like some may belong to the Young Republican, some to the Ski Club, and so forth. The group affiliation of audience may provide excellent clues about the listener's interests and attitudes. However, occupation, economic position, social standing, education, and intelligence are also a variable to consider in demographic audience analysis.
Now I would like to share about audience psychology. Before we are conducting a speech, we need to know and adapt to the psychology of the audience to know who are our listeners. First of all, we need to know their attitudes. Attitudes is the evaluation of people, ideas, objects, events, or even information, and people act in accordance to them. Second is knowledge. We need to know what our audience know or don't know about the topic. These are critical questions to determine the level at which you target your presentation. And second is what do they want to know and what do they need to know. It's critical that we satisfy our audience expectations, otherwise our presentation will be seen as a failure for them. Moving on, we also need to know their belief. Belief is a way which people perceive reality? Are our audience neutral, or are they predisposed to agree with or oppose with our message? For example, we are talking about LGBT. We need to know whether they are agree with the topic or they are strictly object the topic we are going to talk. After that, we need to suit our speech in accordance to their belief. If we are persuading them, we need to also know their part of the story. And the last part is the audience values. Values is what shapes attitudes and belief, and it runs deeper than both attitudes and belief. And because of this, it is the most important thing that we need to know about our audience before conducting a public speech. That's all for audience psychology. Thank you.
Methods of audience analysis. Demographic audience analysis. It consists of two steps: identifying the general demographic features of your audience and gauging the importance of those features to a particular speaking situation. When analyzing demographic information about your audience, avoid stereotyping and always combine demographic audience analysis with situational audience analysis.
Now we're gonna look at the 7 demographic characteristics along with their respective do's and don'ts. First one is ethnicity, where you should avoid referring to specific cultural habits if they are not related, so you don't lose your credibility. Second one is age. Remember to only use terms where your audience group will understand, best to use formal or general slang. Third one is gender. Please try to not make anything gender specific and no assumptions. For example, instead of saying policemen, you say police officers, and never say teacher as a he or a she unless if you are telling a true story. Number 4 is income. If you're giving suggestions or instructions of any kind, please try to have them suitable for all financial status categories, and if not, try to have at least one that's the most affordable, no matter how unpopular. Number 5 is occupation. Make your speech as explanatory as possible so that everyone can understand, regardless of their experience. Number 6 is religion. It's okay to mention your religious practices to your audience with different backgrounds, but make sure to say that they can proceed with their own respective ways or beliefs. Last one is educational level. Do your best to determine the right level of communication for your speech. Try not to make your audience feel down by any means if they are undereducated.
These are method of audience analysis. The first one, we have direct observation. It is a form of qualitative data gathering, perceived through 5 natural senses, which is hearing, seeing, touching, tasting, and smelling. The next one, we have inference. It is a logical extension of your observation and a form of critical thinking known as inductive reasoning, and another form of qualitative data gathering. The next one, that we have data sampling. It uses statistical evidence to quantify and clarify the characteristics of your audience. And the last one, we have basic questionnaires, a series of questions advanced to produce demographic and attitudinal data from your audience.
The topic that I would like to present is audience analysis and speech setting. There is 3 major subtopics, which are classmates as an audience, size of audience, and disposition of the audience. Firstly, classmates as an audience. A speech class is a testing ground where you can develop your communication skills before applying them outside the classroom. Each of your classmates is a real person with real ideas, attitudes, and feelings. Secondly, size of audience. The larger the audience, the more formal your presentation must be. Audience size may also affect your language, choice of appeals, and use of usual aids. It helps us to gain experience and challenge us to speak in a larger group. The third point is disposition of the audience. We need to remember that we need to cover toward the topic, toward speaker, and toward the occasions.
Next is the speech settings. When we facing a speaking situation, it is important to know if there will be any difficulties with the physical settings. This is because giving speech outside from classroom can be unpleasant surprise unless you do your homework first. Do not be shy to ask questions to the person in charge of the event. You can look over the room for a few days in advance or arrive early on the day of the event to inspect the room. You can adjusting the thermostat, checking the setting arrangement, and the location of the lectern to make sure that the audience can see you. If the situation you cannot control, like it's scheduled after lunch or dinner, or the room is too small, or the heat cannot be regulated, you have to work harder to adapt to this aspect of your audience discomfort. Do not be influenced by this poor physical setting. If you are energetic, alert, and involved with your topic, there is a chance that they will forget about their discomfort and only focus on you.
I will be explaining about the last point, which is adapting to the audience. Adapting to the audience is one of the most important keys to a successful public speaking. So when speakers wanted to adapt to their audience, there will be two major stages, which is before the speech and then during the speech. I will be talking about before the speech first. So before the speech, we have to make sure we keep our audience in mind at every speech preparations. By keeping in mind is to assess how they will respond to what we say during the speech. And then we have to adjust what we say to make it clear, appropriate, and convincing as possible. This is not an easy thing to do, but if we try to put our shoes in our audiences, surely we can nail our audience adaptations. Next is during the speech. During the speech, we have to get ready with any kinds of troubles that will come, because sometimes things might not go as planned. For example, when you are presenting your speech, your projector suddenly stops working. When this happens, you shouldn't get panic. Instead, try to relax and then try another ways to present your visual aids. Okay, last but not least, during your speech, you have to keep your eyes out and look for audience feedback. Your audience might be nodding their head in agreement, but sometimes they will have a puzzled look or frowning to show that they are confused about some of the points. So when this happens, maybe you need to back up and then go over your points a little bit and try to explain it again in a simpler way to make them understand better about the topics that you are talking about.